Now, as a cyclist, one of the things that is important to me is safe road interaction. Should be important to everybody, but obviously if you're sometimes out and about and you're not protected inside a big metal box, it becomes a little more important. And so I wanted to talk about something that I think is an important consideration when you're looking at or buying a car that will directly affect road safety. And that is whether or not it has a touchscreen instead of normal controls. Essentially, controls that do not offer tactile feedback in any shape or form are not fit for purpose for use in a vehicle in motion. They're just not, period. All right. So this is actually a safety issue. This is about, are people going to be taking their eyes off the road and injuring or killing each other? A vehicle with normal controls, actual physical devices to operate the radio, the air conditioner, etc., it provides what's called tactile feedback. You can actually feel where those controls are, and therefore you can memorize by touch their location, which means you never have to look away from the road, right? Especially if you keep that car for any length of time. If you are somebody who leases a new car every few months, then I guess maybe you're out of luck. But how many people do that, right? I mean, the way I was raised, you kept the car until it died, basically. So now that may be the other end of the extreme. Maybe most people fall in the middle. But if you're paying any attention at all to what you're doing on a daily basis, you will learn by touch where those controls are, and you will not have to look away from the road to, let's say, turn the radio down or turn on the window defroster or whatever. Because there are actual physical controls whose positions you can memorize based on touch. Now we all in our lives understand the importance of tactile feedback as a mechanism for doing things without having tunnel vision. If I'm riding a bike like this that has down tube shifters, I don't look down to shift. I know from feel where they are and which way to turn them and yada yada. I can even get feedback from the cable going to the actual derailleur, which is in contact with the actual chain while the derailleur plate's pushing on it, as to when it drops into gear. So even if it's friction shift and it doesn't click into place, I can still feel when it's in the right position. And we have other examples of this in our lives, right? Something extreme, like a soldier reloading. He knows where the magazine well is. Or something simple, like reaching into your pocket for your keys, right? You know where your pocket is. You know what your keys feel like. Well, it's just as important behind the wheel. But now what happens if those controls don't have any actual physical surface? You can't memorize their position. You'll never be able to operate them without taking your eyes off the road. Now, imagine you're driving and you need to operate the controls for whatever reason. There's something going on. You hear a siren. You need to turn down the radio so you can be more aware. You're coming up to a toll booth. Whatever. Well, in a normal car, somebody like me who pays attention and learns from feedback, they just reach down and flip the switch. They don't have to take their eyes off the road, distract themselves, do anything unsafe. But now if you're in one of these new cars that has a touchscreen, and I'll get to why this is a safety thing in a second, because pretty much all new cars are doing it. But the point is, if you're in one of these cars that has a touchscreen instead of controls, physical controls, you could have that car for 100 years and never memorize the positions of the switches because it's not physically possible to do so from tactile feedback because there are no physical controls. What does this mean? Well, you're going to have to take your eyes off the road. Okay, you're going to have to take your eyes off the road. This technology used in this particular situation for this application is inherently unsafe. And the big problem here is that touchscreens offer no tactile feedback. They offer no physical reinforcement of where the controls are by touch, because the controls don't have any physical shape. They're just images on a flat screen. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because, well, there's a lot that goes into safe and aware and proper road use. The most basic element is before you even get into conceptualizing different situations and thinking about what to do if something happens and having a plan of action and knowing your vehicle's limitations in extreme situations and your limitations, before you even get into any of that, the most basic thing is just paying attention, right? Keeping your eyes on the road. Now, how do you do that if you can't memorize the position of the controls by touch? so that you actually have to look away from the road if you're going to ever operate those controls while the vehicle's in motion. You can't, right? I mean, if you've got a radio or a stereo, as we used to call them back in the day before they became infotainment systems, and there's knobs or buttons, you just reach down and touch the button. You don't have to take your eyes off the road. Now, I said I'd get back to the real danger in a second, which is that you don't have any option, right? This, going forward, is how pretty much all new cars are designed. Now, the logical question that comes up is, don't these car companies and these car designers know this? Or what, are they stupid? Of course they know it. They just don't care, right? You're talking about people who have spent, some of these companies have spent millions of advertising dollars to convince people that being on the cell phone while they're driving is perfectly normal and safe, right? That constantly having an iPhone, glued in front of your face, even to the point where you're on the verge of constantly committing a vehicular homicide, is perfectly normal and acceptable. And you could argue about whether that's been pushed to become so central to so many of their lives, because it's just about, marketing them stuff and companies being greedy, or whether it's something more sinister than avarice. But the point is that, nevertheless, what you can argue is that these car companies and the people who make these infotainment systems that use touchscreens as car controls, they don't just exist in a world where paying attention to an electronic device has been pushed to take precedence over paying attention to what's in front of your eyes. They are partially responsible for creating that world in the first place, right? Again, these are the people who've tried to convince you that nearly committing a vehicular homicide out of negligence is okay. So why would they care that the device they're using in the car isn't suited for purpose from a safety standpoint? They wouldn't. Now, because these companies literally don't care about you, the thing to do is you have to make sure you take care to look out for yourself and other people around you. Starting with the most basic thing, which is making sure you buy a car whose controls allow you to pay attention to the road, which means whose controls allow you tactile feedback. This means avoiding a car that has a touchscreen, or if you must buy a car that has a touchscreen, one where the touchscreen isn't necessary for the primary controls like the power, the volume, etc., and those are still operated by physical knobs or buttons. Now, as this technology moves more and more to the forefront, you may find yourself with no option but to get a used car. That's as may be. But the point is, this technology is not safe. It's not fit for purpose for use in a vehicle in motion. And, keep that in mind when you're buying a car, when you're looking at a car. All right? Lone Rider out.